Today I'm doing a live Go code roast. We're going to be diving into this new tool that's about sending email. We're going to see what the code is like. I'm going to talk about what I like, what I don't like, and I'm with the author today, so he could explain maybe some of the questions I might have. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jonathan Hall. I'm excited today to have my first guest on this channel, Mechiel Lukkien. Did I say that right?
Yeah, pretty good.
Great. It's a little bit embarrassing that I'm not good at saying your name because we've known each other for several years. We're co-organizers of the Go Amsterdam meetup, but I'm not a native Dutch speaker, so it's a little bit tricky for me. But apparently, I didn't do too terrible. Would you tell us about your project? Well, actually, before we do that, would you tell us a little bit about who you are, your history with Go, and then we'll dive into the project.
All right, sure. So I've been using Go pretty much since the beginning. Even before Go, I used to be into Inferno, Plan 9, Limbo. So that's basically predecessors to Go. So nice. Ever since the start of Go, I've been there.
Cool. And so this project that you just announced last week is ready, or I don't know how you're calling it, if it's an alpha or beta or what, but you announced it to the world at least. Tell us what it is and the state of the project.
Yeah, sure. So this actually started about 1.5 years ago, I think, the first prototyping. It's a mail server. So the idea is that you want to run your own mail server, be in charge of your own mail, not put it in some cloud provider. But nowadays, mail is a pretty big topic because of all the protocols and all the, let's say, reputation things you need to think about to get email accepted by other mail servers. So Mox, the whole point of Mox is to make it very easy and simple to run your own mail. So it does SMTP, IMAP, and all kinds of more things.
That's a really cool concept. I mean, I come from a mail background. For 10 years, I worked on a mail server and spam filter, and we sort of cobbled together all the little bits and pieces. You know, we had Spam Assassin written in Perl, and we had Qmail written in C, and we had some Bayesian analysis written in Lua, and we had a whole bunch of different things, post fix, and a whole bunch of different pieces sort of cobbled together from everywhere. So the concept here is that this kind of does the majority of that for you in a single package, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there is lots of open source software out there. It's high quality. It's actually higher quality than Mox at this stage. Mm-hmm. But just so much you have to put together. And of course, there's also systems that help you do that. So they just give you, let's say, a Docker image. There's, I think, Mail in the Box that does many things together. But it's many components.
Cool. So we're going to look at the code. Which is maybe a little bit interesting on this project, since this project is intended to be used by end users. I imagine you didn't write it per se with other hackers in mind, or at least that wasn't your first concern. So I might be nitpicking this a little bit more than if it were, say, a library that was intended to be used by other developers. But I'm curious to hear, because I did record a traditional code roast of this, and it was kind of dull because I mostly found myself asking, why did he do this? It might make sense, and then trying to like verbally guess your thoughts. Now I have access to your thoughts, so it'll be, I think, a better video. So the project is on GitHub. You can see here it has an MIT license, so it's completely open source and everything is great to go. The first thing I noticed when I was trying to roast this was the Mox commit message here. And I thought, that's interesting. I bet he's been working on this in another repository for a long time and just squashed everything together. So I looked at the commit history, and it's longer now. I think there were 4 or 5 commits at the time I did that.
Yeah.
Tell us about why you did that. Why is this all squashed together? What happened to the previous history?
No, there's actually no previous history. I just worked from Git staging. So I just kept adding a bit, and I have had tests for a long time, so I didn't feel a need to commit anything up until the point where I published it.
Does that mean there was no backup? If your laptop had gotten stolen, this would have been gone?
No, my laptop has backups. I mean, we're professionals, right?
All right, good. Very nice. One of the first places I always start when I'm reviewing a Go project is I start with a go.mod. And so let's do that today. I was actually quite impressed at how small this mod is, considering how this Godot mod is, considering how much stuff the package aims to do. So the first, actually more than half, just over half of the dependencies are your own packages. It looks like. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. I like to reinvent the wheel a bit.
Yeah.
Well, I like to be in charge of the dependencies
right.
I use.
And then some things from golang.org/x, which you can almost kind of consider to be the standard library, like the standard library plus or something. Mm-hmm. So I almost don't even consider those because so that really the only real external dependency is this Prometheus client. Why is that in there?
Provides metrics for like the mail operation. So I use Prometheus metrics in pretty much anything I make to get alerting on things that break. Right. It's actually quite a big library for what it does. So in that sense, it's not great, but it is very convenient.
Yeah,
to get in there.
And then the independent or the indirect dependencies. It looks like a large number of these come from Prometheus. Maybe the majority of them.
Yeah.
Some of them even say Prometheus, and then protocol buffers. A lot of this stuff I know comes from there. But those are less interesting. I like to look at the direct dependencies just to get a feel for what to expect. So I'm a little bit curious. You're doing IMAP, SMTP. I don't know what else you're doing. I know you're doing DKIM, I imagine, SPF.
There's DKIM, SPF, DMARC, TLS reporting, MTA, STS. That's one of those new things that also takes up effort. Auto configuration. There's different styles. There is internationalized email support, so that's more, it's not like a single protocol, but it's more updates. There's spam filters in there, so reputation-based spam filtering. So if you send something to junk and it's from a certain sender, certain domain, certain IP address, certain IP subnet, it may be rejected in the future. And there's also content-based spam filtering, because spammers like to get like on new IPs without reputations, new domains.
Yep.
So then you can look at what they're trying to send. They have to send something. So it feels spammy.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed that you've done all that without pulling in third-party libraries. Well, talk about your decision to do that. I mean, was that just a purity play, or are you trying to keep things secure so that you understand them, you can sort of audit them in yourself, or what was the decision there?
Yeah, that's pretty much it's part. Like if you want to, you can use external dependencies if they exist, of course. But my experience, there's always something about them, right? That's not quite so great, and you can fork them and change them. But I also find that if you use dependencies, of course, you don't go through the process of understanding fully, completely what's going on, what it's doing. And by implementing them myself, I mean, I enjoy implementing network protocols, and so it's also fun. Yeah. But by implementing them, you basically become the expert. And so I found time and time again, if there's a small problem, like in one of these components, like I just know I just can go in and usually fix it immediately.
Yeah.
So that's fun. Of course, it took me quite some time to get there, but
I can imagine.
But I've had fun doing it. So.
I'm curious if you have written these components. Say, let's just talk about SMTP as an example. Have you written it such that somebody could use that as a library for their own thing, or not really?
Yeah, no, not really. So I was kind of thinking that's definitely like a sort of a concern. Mox has these packages laid out, like they look that you might be able to reuse them, but in the end, they sort of still all depend on more and more packages. So it's not actually so reusable. Okay. Maybe some of them are, but for example, the SMTP server, it also delivers the mail to some place. So it's not say pluggable or something. It's not like because if you want to make a library for making SMTP servers, you need to have to put in hooks for events to happen, and that's not present.
Yeah. Okay. One of the first comments I made in the video that I'm not releasing was I like the way you organize your imports. You follow the same pattern I do. It's kind of a standard pattern, but a lot of newcomers don't know that, so I think it's worth pointing out. Essentially, the standard library is grouped first. Then you have third-party imports, which includes the golang.org/x tree. Then you have your own dependencies, but that aren't part of this repository. Mm-hmm. And then you have the dependencies that are part of this repository. So it just makes it really easy to, especially when you have a list this long. If you only have 2 or 3, it doesn't matter so much. But when you have a list this long, it's really nice to know those sections, and you can more easily jump to see, did I include mox minus or whatever that is already in this import thing? So so kudos on that. That would have been one of my positives on the roast if I had released that. If I'm not mistaken, this package is basically just setting up the CLI. You have a single executable that sort of runs in multiple modes or does different things, and this sets it all up, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So one thing I think that might confuse some newcomers, I think I know why you did this, but I would like to have your confirmation. So I see you've set up this command slice that has an anonymous struct with two fields in it, CMD and function and FN or a function, and then you have this init function that runs through that and does something. Would you explain why you did that and what's the benefit of this approach?
Yeah, I think
if you remember.
Sometimes to dig deep why I did something, but I think I did this recently. I think I needed the subcommands are also like separate words, and I just needed to have them separately. And I didn't want to have like tokenize them by hand because I had to do more typing. So it's more like for me with the big commands slice, just very simple, just a string. And then, I can do a little bit of post-processing. It's code. Computer will do it for me. Keep it readable, but then use the processed form in the rest of the program.
Exactly. And that was exactly my guess, too, is just to make this list readable, because I think trying to express this format in code would be cumbersome to type and worse, hard to read.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not sure how much of this is really interesting to us. I spent some time looking through it, and it's pretty straightforward stuff. That it's just handling command line arguments and help output and these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but I wanted to be able to sort of generate the text that's in there in a documentation. So that's why the command struct and how it's being called is a bit weird. But
one thing I've noticed about Go command line tools is there's not really a standardized way. I mean, most seem to use Cobra. Some yours doesn't, but it uses a lot of the same sort of conventions, I think, because Cobra is built around the flags package in the standard library. But there's not like a well-defined approach to doing that. Like we have the package, but that's kind of all we have. There's not a whole lot of defined structure around it. It's not opinionated. So you end up with a large range of structures for these things. So could you talk to me about these sconf-doc struct tags? I mean, I can guess exactly what this is for, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, the sconf package, I created that a while ago and used it in this project as well. The idea for this is that I can write configuration files by just making a Go type, a struct, and write like an example configuration file with documentation immediately without like further having to write my own example configuration files, because they always get out of date, etc. Now this is basically the way to always get them correct because they're part of the code. It does mean you get long snippets of text in your type definitions, but I'm okay with that.
Okay. Have you considered trying to reuse GoDoc comments for this purpose? Because I can think of some drawbacks there, but I'm curious what thought process you went through.
Yeah, I have thought about it for a little while, but the problem then is that you need a separate tool again to take them out of the code. And so in another place with the way the API is handled, like there's an admin page and it uses a web API, that does use that approach for documentations about the functions and types. But that's pretty much a little bit bigger thing for this configuration style. I just wanted to keep it very small because the struct tags, you can read them at runtime. The GoDoc comments, you cannot.
Yeah. You'd either have to use some code generation
or
embed the source files in your executable, which seems ridiculous.
If only there was a standard way to get your GoDoc in your program at runtime. But
yeah, that would be nice. All right, so I agree. I mean, it makes it a little bit hard to read and I imagine to edit. I'm curious, did you use any tools to make this easier? Did you edit these comments in a text editor and copy and paste? Or do you have word wrap turned on in your editor so it's a little easier to read? How do you handle this?
Definitely have word wrap So
Yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah.
We need that feature in GitHub to make this easier.
Yeah.
So one thing that jumped out at me in this section is you have, in some cases, multiple levels of anonymous structs, which sometimes is a pain in the
Yes.
rear end to use.
Yeah. It
But
is.
I'm guessing it wasn't here, or you wouldn't have done it this way. How is this used, and why is that not a problem?
But, so the alternative is to make types, and then
Yeah.
you can use them. But if you use them only once, it feels like you have to jump around a bit. So now this is just the immediate thing. It's like the easy way of reading this. Plus, I'm not. This is not a type you use a lot. I create it. You read it from a config file. So
Yeah.
the
So
config
you're
file-
never creating an instance of this in code. You're just reading from a
rarely.
file.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the problem. If you need to create those deeply nested things in code, it's going to be you have to do lots of individual assignments to fields in there.
Exactly. And then another comment in this area, I see you have GoDoc on several of the exported symbols on the static type. Actually, maybe that's a question. That's one thing I think I brought up. What does static mean? Because I was confused by that. And yeah.
Yeah, it's so there are actually two configuration files. You get the main one called mox.conf, and that's a static configuration file, so that doesn't change all so much. And at runtime, so basically you create it once you run your program. If you need to change it, you have to restart the whole program. So
Got it. Okay.
so during the program lifetime, the thing doesn't change. There's also the domains configuration, and or the dynamic one. It's called dynamic. It has domains and the accounts, and you can, while it's running, you can just add domains, add accounts, remove accounts, etc.
Got it. So if I need to change the host name, I have to restart.
Yes.
If I want to add new domains or new accounts, it can happen on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Makes
so in the code, if you can always access the static configuration file without locks, but if you want to read the dynamic data, dynamic config, you have to go through a function that does it with a proper lock around it.
And then a number of the other struct types and so on don't have GoDoc. Was that an intentional choice on your part? Did you feel like Acme didn't need it, or you just never got around to it, or something else?
Yeah, at one point I went through the whole code base and added comments, but at some point you also find yourself typing stuff that doesn't really add anything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that this is necessarily every case, because I also got tired of writing comments. So at some point, some things may need a little bit more, and especially more like explanation, rationale why I'm doing it this way instead of. I mean, for these like Acme, we probably, if you know a bit about TLS and so on, you know what Acme is about, you know what a listener is. So, don't want
I
to
can
add
imagine some of these might be confusing to somebody who's not really familiar with SMTP or something. Or somebody who's maybe new to Go wouldn't probably know what pprof is, but they can figure it out.
And that's also why there are a bit of these sconf doc lines in there. They help a bit with that.
Sure.
Yeah, but always you have to think about how much do you want to explain. You cannot have a full CS course in every code base, right?
Yeah. So I thought there was a bug in this code at first. And actually, there might be a very subtle bug in this code. So we here you're opening http:/account.html, and if there's no error, then you serve that. I think this is
it's built in
an HTTP handler. Yeah. So you serve that content. That's fine. If there is an error, though, then you use this embedded version, which is your default, right?
Yeah.
So at first I thought there was a bug here because it looked to me like we were, I don't know, I think I was thinking that you were, I don't remember why I thought there was a bug here. But the subtlety of the potential bug here is, and I'm curious, maybe this was intentional. I completely understand the idea to serve the original if the file is not found. But what if you have a permissions error or something like that?
Yeah, so the reason why I have this is because I'm developing locally. I'm just editing the HTML file, reload it, and I get the latest version.
Okay.
So I'm assuming this is never present on any different system. And
got it.
so whenever
it's really
something,
just a local testing feature.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
Okay.
point of this thing.
Okay.
I don't want to recompile every time I edit my HTML and
Of course.
restart. That will be
Yeah.
not fun. But it definitely looks weird. This does not look like your typical like Go code with error handling.
Yeah, I was like, the error handling is very light here. I was assuming that this was intended for the user to create an account.html with their own branding or something in it if they want to, and that this was just a reasonable fallback, and that the fallback might fall back in the wrong situations, or at least maybe if there was a permissions problem, for example, that you would want to report that somewhere rather than just ignoring it. So that was my thought process here.
Yeah. I definitely can have a comment there explaining why it's doing it this way. Yeah. So I'm assuming no one ever creates their own HTML account HTML. Just for me developing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I no longer feel like it's a potential bug. It's just a shortcut for development. So. See, it's so good that you're here to explain this, so I don't have to make wild assumptions. Any particular part of this code that you think deserves a particular look? Because there's a lot of code here, and I don't want to keep you for 3 weeks going through all of it.
So there definitely can be a comment about all the panic error handling that I'm using.
Okay.
That may be definitely a valid comment. It's not very Go-like. I mean, for some things it's perfectly fine and quite normal, I think. So, for example, there's lots of parsers. There's a bunch of email headers or specific like DKIM DNS records that need to be parsed, and for those it's I think quite common to have like panic-based error handling. But I'm also using it in the SMTP server, IMAP server, and it is really well. So initially I started out by a bit of prototyping, and then it's just an easy way to not have to write too many same kind of lines of code. Mm-hmm. But it's stuck with it, and it's actually working quite nicely. So I don't feel like an urge to change it. But it's definitely something that you would think is a bit un-Go-like.
So to be clear, I'll find some examples here for anybody who's not really sure what we're talking about. Here's an example where I'm assuming this is an example you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where if there's an error, you don't return it, you just panic the error, and then I'm assuming you have a defer somewhere that recovers that, so that those panics never cross the application boundary. Although this is a self-contained application anyway, but at least you turn it into something visible and more user-friendly rather than your program just panicking and your mail service crashed.
Definitely. Yeah, that's actually a tricky thing, because if you have any Go routine that just panics without a recover, then your whole program crashes. So definitely don't want that. So I try to be careful to put anytime I start a Go routine, have some kind of recover at the top to prevent restarts basically. So in the code you just showed before, that was about I/O errors. Mm-hmm. So what can happen often in IMAP, SMTP, any network thing is that your other side of the connection just disappears and you get an error that can happen at pretty much any time. Yeah. So those errors get thrown up, and at the top of the server there's a command processing loop, and that recognizes these I/O errors and just either shuts down or usually just shuts down the connection, the Go routine that handles that connection.
Mm-hmm. So for anybody watching this who thinks this is sacrilege, let me just point out the fact that in the standard library, the JSON marshaller does this exact same thing. So I know that Rob Pike in his Go proverb says, "Don't panic," and we hear that all the time. Don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. Even the creators of that rule violate that rule at times. The key is they don't let those panics cross the application or the API boundary. So in other words, if you're pulling in a third-party library, it's not going to panic on you randomly that you have to recover. It might use panics internally, or in the case of this application, the application uses panics internally, but it recovers those and turns them into something nicer to display to the public API. So just understand that that's what we're talking about. Okay. Oh, you talked about this Mox Dash. Did you call it Mox Dash or Mox Minus? What is that package? Yeah. How did you come up with that name?
Yeah, so it's basically just a catch-all for... So I just wanted to name it Mox, but of course that doesn't work, because if you compile your program, you'll get a binary called Mox, but there's a directory called Mox.
Okay.
You just need something that's named slightly differently that still is that name. I didn't want to call it state. Maybe I should have called it state or bag of stuff or misc.
So this is kind of the typical helpers or utils or the sort of grab bag package is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. But the import or the package name is just mock. So the path has the dash in it, but okay.
So what I found interesting, but it's not necessarily a Go thing, but all these protocols and they have specifications, requests for comments, RFCs, and the implementation. Like this is many implementations of all these protocols, and somewhere early in the project, I started wondering how am I going to keep track of how the implementation implements the specification, and so I put lots of annotations in the code. You can see it in say the SMTP server. So the code is heavily documented, referencing the RFCs. So if you say go to server.go, that's this also works, but server.go has lots of. So if you just search for RFC, you'll find lots of hits.
182 references.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So you can see basically it's a path to the specific RFCs. In this case, 6409, line 19. So it just points exactly to an RFC. RFCs are published once; they don't change afterwards. If you just take the text version, you get just
nice.
You can just reference the exact line. In the RFC directory, there's a makefile and some Go code that downloads all of these and then reads through the Go code, changes the RFCs that are downloaded because they're all less than 80 characters wide. So what it does is after the 80 characters, it adds links back to the code. So now I can go in my editor, click on one of these references, open the RFC, and then read the RFC, maybe paragraphs up and down also have references. And from there I can jump back to the code. So
that's pretty clever.
That has helped me quite a lot with like keeping track of all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because like my initial prototyping went like read RFC or not even read RFC, just do whatever I think the RFC might give out. I mean, I knew a little bit about SMTP and so on, so you can just make something quick and dirty. But yeah, the more complete you want to be, the more the kind of decisions and like, why are you doing it? It becomes much more basically. Yeah, lots of details.
Yeah,
you want to write them down, but so this has helped me a lot with keeping track of all those details.
Is there any part of this project that you found to be more challenging than surprising? More challenging than expected? Was it a surprise?
Well, many times I felt like, I think I'm like almost there. And then you try to say finally run this server yourself, and you get into, of course, all kinds of issues with the real world. You have to change them. So I've gone through several revisions, but so it's not really a Go thing, but several revisions of having written some kind of implementation of a specification, thinking you're almost done, and then feeling you have to you just did the first 10% instead of the first 90.
Yeah. Well, if my experience from 10 years ago is any indication, you will be finding mail servers in the wild and mail clients in the wild that do random crazy things that you're going to be writing patches for forever. And it probably never changes because every year new ones come out. Hopefully we've standardized a bit since 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm still looking for, say, a mailing list that discusses like interoperability issues with mail servers. I already found a bunch of things that are strange.
Yeah.
So initially I thought, well, I don't want to. This is my mail server, and probably say especially spammers are doing weird stuff. So I'm okay. I'll just reject them, and then I'll be even better off, right? But of course, then you figure out you want to import all your old messages into your mail server, and you have to be able to handle all those crappy messages you accepted in the past.
Yeah. And then you want to send email to somebody who has different sense of what the RFC means in this way or that way. Or if you want to do gray listing, or you want to send to somebody who does gray listing, or they're too aggressive or something. There's all these weird corner cases. Or certain versions of Outlook don't display certain content types or whatever.
Lots of that stuff.
Yeah.
So just when I just started using it, I migrated my previous email setup to Mox a few weeks ago. And initially, just a few small things, and then I couldn't send mail to some people. So you figure out what's going on.
And,
actually, there was a bug. I had a bug in my code, but it was because I completely misinterpreted the resolver, like the net package's resolver. There's a lookup CNAME function. So having done a bit of DNS management and so on, I thought it would look up a CNAME record, and so I say maybe return not found if there's no CNAME record. Doesn't do that. It just returns the canonical name. So if there is no CNAME record, then apparently the name is canonical already, and returns that name. So I was like, it's a bit more higher level than I thought.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, hey, I want to thank you for letting us look at your code, and let's just point out where to download it. I guess it's on github.com/mjl. Dash. You like those dashes at the end, don't you?
Yeah, you need to have some kind of filler character, right?
Yeah. So github.com/mjl-/mox. Of course, a link will be in the description of the video too, if you want to check that out. And I guess you're open and encouraging feedback. You want people to try this out, file bug reports, questions if they have difficulty setting it up. You're looking for that sort of thing.
Would be great. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks.
Thank you for coming on. I hope people have found this interesting. It's fun to look at code that's written by somebody who's been doing Go for a long time. It's a little bit different taste or different flavor than some of the previous roasts I've done, where it's a little bit greener people. Anyway, if you would like me to review your code on my channel, leave a link and a comment below. You might not be able to leave a link. YouTube seems to not like links in comments, but leave a comment below. Or go to boldlygo.tech. You can find my contact details there, and you can send me an email with the link to your code. I'd love to review that in an upcoming video. Until next time.